Welcome everyone to current event edition for the Crowd Management Doctor. These are news stories from August and September 2023. Now, this is normally the start of the year for schools, which means start of the football season, and there have been a plethora of various related, unfortunately, incidents associated with shootings and criminal misconduct and stampedes and violence and all sorts of different other things, fights, you name it. And so let's get to the news stories, but I want people just to remember that the start of the year is when we're often very, very active, and that's when we have people at their highest amount of anxiety, so we have to be able to understand and appreciate what's going on around us, and that's why being abreast of current affairs and current issues in our industry is so important. So let's get to the news stories. The Columbus police are reviewing tactics after mace was used at a game. Unfortunately, the use of mace by police in Columbus, Ohio, was used to disperse a crowd of local and international soccer fans following a July 31st match at Lower.com Field. And they're evaluating what they've done, and they're going to be examining how they move forward. Now, the Columbus Division of Police last month hired Clifford Scott of Keele University in the United Kingdom to help law enforcement find better ways to interact with rowdy sports crowds and protesters. Body camera footage obtained through a public records request showed police at the game just before 10:30 p.m. when a call came in that someone had lit an object on fire, which that sometimes happens during soccer games, like flares and stuff like that. Several officers left the stadium and went towards a crowd of people. As police approached the large crowd, drums are heard beating in the background. Police reached the crowd attending the international tournament between Columbus Crew and Mexico City's Club America and immediately began telling them to disperse or they would be sprayed. In the center of the crowd, a man flew a large Club America flag and an object was on fire in front of him on the ground. The police then sprayed mace on the fans. After the crowd dispersed, some people are heard complaining to the police that there is kids, or maybe there are kids, might be the better way to say it, in the crowd. Another man approached police with a large cup of water and handed it to the officers. The officer poured the water on the flaming object and called the man a lifesaver. According to one witness, at one point in the center of the drum circle, a small Columbus Crew flag was lit on fire. She said the general vibe was fun and lighthearted. No one was violent, and fans from both teams were singing and laughing. Then the Columbus police officers entered the center of the circle out of nowhere without using air horns or flashlights and maced the entire group. She said she and her family were standing far enough away that they only had a coughing fit, but she witnessed and aided a family with a child who were unfortunately maced in the face. The next story involved ejection from high school football fans found circling a stadium with a stolen gun, unfortunately. Fan behavior and stadium security concerts don't necessarily end with ejections, as evidence when a man who had been removed from a high school football game in Orlando, Florida, was found circling the stadium with several stolen guns in his car. Members of the Orlando Police Department were on routine patrol at Jones High School, which was hosting Tampa Jesuit High School, when they faced off in the annual Legacy Classic at Camping World Stadium. Officers witnessed a man who was kicked out of the game get into a car in the parking lot, which was then seen circling the area several times as if they were looking for someone. When officers initiated a traffic stop, 6 men were inside the car and probable cause was established for a search. During the search, 5 guns were recovered. 3 of them were listed as stolen and 1 was a ghost gun, meaning it had no serial number, police said. That's one of the unfortunate things. You could kick people out of your venue, but they're still basically on the footprint of the property, and you have to be careful that they're not intending on doing something that's nefarious. The next story is entitled 1 Dead, 4 Injured in Shooting at High School Football Game. A 16-year-old boy is dead after a shooting at an Oklahoma high school football game on Friday, August 25th. According to news stories, gunshots erupted from the visitor side of the stadium at Katakau High School. Probably mispronouncing that, but that happens. Uh, During the third quarter of a game against Dell City High School. Police said the incident began with an argument between at least two men in the stands. A 16-year-old who was not a student at Chakatawa was shot in the groin area. He was taken to the hospital where he died of his injuries, unfortunately. Four other people sustained injuries, including a 42-year-old man who was shot in the chest. The man was at the ICU and in stable condition at the time of the writing of the article. A girl was shot in her thigh but was treated at the hospital and released. Two other girls suffered injuries while trying to flee the area. One had a broken wrist and the other had a broken leg. 2 guns and 8 rounds were recovered from the scene. The next story is entitled Police Arrest 3 Juveniles on Gun Charges Outside High School Football Game. If you can see, there's a theme here about guns and violence, unfortunately at high school football games primarily. Police in Columbus, Ohio confirmed that 3 juveniles were arrested for brandishing guns outside a football game Friday, August 25th between Carver and Spencer high schools. 2 15-year-olds and 1 16-year-old were arrested outside A.J. McCullung Stadium on weapons charges. 3 guns, including one that was reportedly stolen, were confiscated. 2 of the teenagers were taken into custody when they were seen brandishing the guns, according to the police. The incident reportedly started a fight inside the stadium at the end of the third quarter, which created a panic that spread outside the stadium, and the game was halted and not finished as a result of that. Chicago police say shooting likely originated inside White Sox Stadium. And so this is a major issue in terms of security screening. And so let's get right to that story. Chicago police now say a shooting Friday night, August 25th, at the White Sox game that injured 2 people more likely originated inside the stadium, but the matter still remains under investigation. 3 days after the shooting, the public still did not know the details of how the shooting happened, who was responsible, and if the shooting actually originated in the ballpark, and more importantly, how did a weapon get past stadium security? Fans also had questions as if 2 people were shot, why was play not suspended? There are some conflicting answers that the Chicago police gave. Initially, they requested that play be suspended, but when press said while the request was made initially, play was allowed to continue to avoid panic. And as the police department said, we made the request initially because we did not know what was going on. We had reports of people shot at Sox Park, but that wasn't confirmed, so we allowed the game to continue, not to create a panic, said the police captain. There was a woman who had an obvious wound to her right medial calf, one doctor said. Her companion was holding pressure with napkins, and then the doctor, who was a fan at the time of the game, also got there, introduced themselves as a physician, and asked what's going on. The doctor then heard what sounded like a bottle break, and then there was the sting, and that's what the victim said. It was later discovered that the woman had actually smuggled a gun past the stadium metal detectors by concealing it within the folds of her own belly fat. It later discharged accidentally, causing her injuries. The discharge occurred during the 4th inning of a game against the Oakland A's, and police reportedly wanted the game to be suspended, as I said before, but they allowed it to go on to avoid panic. This is one of those unfortunate incidents where there could have been some mistakes all the way around, but because they were able to confiscate the weapon almost immediately, they were allowing the game to continue. The next story is about Burning Man, and attendees were making a mass exodus after a dramatic weekend that left thousands stuck in the desert. Thousands of Burning Man attendees finally made their mass exodus after intense rain over the weekend flooded the camp site and filled them with thick ankle-deep mud, straining more than 70,000 fans as they waited for the Nevada desert city to dry out so they could get out. It wasn't until Monday afternoon that organizers officially announced that driving bans that was imposed amid heavy rains on Friday and then on Saturday had been lifted and attendees could safely leave Black Rock City. There was still muddy and parts were still difficult to navigate, and that's what the organizers warned people about. Take their time. They urged festival goers to postpone their departure to Tuesday, if at all possible, to avoid creating massive congestion, which included lines that were around 7 hours long. There was one fan who passed away during the event, but that wasn't because of the event itself. It was a medical condition, according to certain reports that were out there. The next story is entitled "One Dead, Another Injured After Shooting at Louisiana High School Football Game." So we had a brief interruption of the high school shootings and gun issues at games. Now we're back to them. A student was killed and another person was injured after a shooting occurred during a high school football game Friday at Port Allen High School in Louisiana. The rest of the game was canceled following the shooting. The name of the student who was killed was not released. These are just unfortunately coming up way too often, and we have to do something about it as a society, but that's often beyond our scope. The next story is called "Protesters Arrested After Delayed U.S. Open Match." 2 protesters were arrested after play at the U.S. Open was interrupted on September 7th when they began shouting, and one glued his feet to the ground during a match at Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. Saya Mukhopadhyay, 50, of White Plains, was charged with criminal trespass and disorderly conduct after gluing his feet to the concrete floor in the stands. Gregory Schwedek, 35, of Manhattan, who was also escorted out, was charged with criminal trespass. 3 of the 4 protesters were escorted out of the stadium without further incident. The 4th protester affixed their bare feet to the floor of the seating bowl. Due to the nature of this action, the New York Police Department and medical personnel were needed in order to safely remove this individual from the stadium. I mean, who would have thunk that you would need to be prepared for people gluing their feet to the concrete floor? The next story is titled "Madagascar Stadium Crush Kills 12, 80 Hurt." At least 12 people had been killed and 80 injured after a stampede occurred with sport fans trying to enter Madagascar's, and this is a small island country lying off the southeastern coast of Africa's, national stadium for the opening ceremony of the Indian Ocean Island Games. Al Jazeera stated that the stampede occurred at the entrance to the Berea Stadium on August 25th, where a crowd of about 50,000 spectators had arrived to attend the event. The 41,000 seat capacity Kianja Barea Mashamina is a rugby union and football stadium. It's also used for concerts and athletics. The Indian Ocean Island Games is a quadrennial multi-sport event from the Indian Ocean Island nations. The game was created by the International Olympic Committee in 1977 and currently gathers the island nations and territories of Mauritius, Seychelles, Comoros, Madagascar, Mayotte, Reunion, and the Maldives. The 2023 Indian Ocean Island Games kicked off in Madagascar from August 25th, and they were slated to continue through September 3rd. Their National Olympic Committee, based in, of course, Lausanne, Switzerland, is trying to examine what's going on and to try to figure out, how to prevent these kind of issues from occurring in the future. Now, Madagascar's Prime Minister, Christian Nitze, told reporters at a hospital in the capital city that the provisional toll shows 12 dead and some 80 injured. The president of Madagascar, Andre Rajoelina, who was present at the opening ceremony, called for a minute of silence. A tragic event occurred, he said, because there was a pushing there were injuries and deaths at the entrance, he said in a television speech. TV broadcasts showed dazed and shocked people trying to locate their shoes piled amongst objects lost in deadly crush. Other images from inside the stadium shared on social media showed the stands packed with spectators. At least 15 people were killed in a similar incident at a similar stadium in Madagascar in 2019. That just obviously shows lessons have not been learned, unfortunately. Because there have been so many stories in August and September of 2023, we're going to break this up into two sections. So you've just watched the first section, and now if you have time or if you want to watch it later, you can watch the second section.